At my birthday dinner, my sister stood up and announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby, clearly waiting for me to break down. "We're a family now," she said with a smug smile. I didn't say a word. I just raised my glass, made a toast, and dropped a truth so shocking it shattered their world in seconds. Can you imagine sitting at your own birthday dinner, ready to celebrate, only for your younger sister to drop a bomb that shatters your entire world? She stood there, smugly announcing her pregnancy with my husband, expecting me to crumble. But what she didn't know was that I had a secret of my own, one that would make their little fantasy explode. Hi, I'm Samantha Parker, and for as long as I can remember, my younger sister Jessica always took what was mine. My toys as a kid, my clothes as a teenager, even my spotlight at every single family gathering. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what she took at my birthday dinner last month. As she stood there, beaming, announcing her pregnancy with my husband, Kyle, I swear I could feel my world cracking beneath my feet. What neither of them knew was that I'd been hiding something too, something that was about to shatter their twisted little fantasy forever. Growing up with Jessica was like living in a perpetual shadow. From the moment she was born, when I was 4, my parents treated her like their golden child. Jessica had the prettier dresses, the better birthday parties, and somehow always got the last piece of cake. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, they just loved her more visibly, more enthusiastically. "Look how artistic Jessica is," my mom would gush as my sister scribbled with crayons, while my straight-A report cards were met with simple nods. "And that's nice, Sam." My dad coached Jessica's softball team, but was always too busy for my debate competitions. These small rejections piled up over the years, building a wall of resentment I desperately tried not to acknowledge. Jessica developed a pattern early on. Whatever I had, she wanted. My favorite teddy bear mysteriously ended up in her room. The sweater I saved my allowance for would disappear from my closet and reappear on her. When I was chosen for the lead in the school play, Jessica suddenly developed an interest in drama and convinced my parents to enroll her in expensive acting classes. "Why can't you just share with your little sister?" became the family mantra, always directed at me, never at her. So I learned to hold tightly to the things that mattered most, to guard my heart and my dreams with vigilance. College was my escape. I moved 3 states away to Northwestern University, far enough that Jessica couldn't follow. Those 4 years were transformative. Without Jessica's shadow, I bloomed. I made genuine friends who valued me for me. I discovered my passion for marketing and communications. And in my junior year, I met Kyle. Kyle Henderson walked into my advanced marketing seminar with tousled brown hair and the most genuine smile I'd ever seen. He dropped his coffee the first time we spoke, stammering an apology as the liquid splashed across my notes. Instead of being annoyed, I found his nervousness endearing. He offered to buy me dinner to make up for it, and I said yes. That dinner turned into breakfast the next morning, talking until the sun came up about our dreams, our families, our favorite books. "I've never met anyone who gets me like you do," he told me that night, and for once, I felt truly seen. Our relationship flourished. Kyle was everything I'd dreamed of, attentive, kind, ambitious, but not at the expense of others. We graduated together, moved to Chicago, and built our careers side by side. When he proposed 2 years later on the shores of Lake Michigan at sunrise, I felt like I'd finally found my happily ever after. Then came the wedding planning, and with it, the inevitable return of Jessica into my life. She'd graduated from college by then and was working as a pharmaceutical sales rep, a job that seemed to involve more flirting than actual sales. When I called to tell her about my engagement, her response was lukewarm at best. "Well, I guess congratulations." "Is he rich?" Those were her first words, not "I'm happy for you" or "you deserve this." Despite my reservations, I asked Jessica to be my maid of honor. My mother insisted, saying, "It would break her heart if you didn't." Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. Jessica wore white to my bridal shower, and at the rehearsal dinner, she gave a toast that was more about her than me. But I was determined to rise above it, to not let old wounds spoil my happiness. The wedding itself was beautiful, despite Jessica's attempts to center herself. She showed up late for photos, dramatically cried louder than my mother during the ceremony, and openly flirted with Kyle's groomsmen during the reception. Kyle noticed her behavior and squeezed my hand reassuringly. "She's just jealous because you're so incredible," he whispered. And I believed him. The first 2 years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a small house in the suburbs, advanced in our careers, and began talking about starting a family. Kyle and I agreed to wait until we were more established financially, though I suspected he was hesitant for other reasons he couldn't articulate. Still, I respected his caution and focused on our relationship and careers. Then, about a year ago, something began to shift. Kyle started working later, his phone perpetually face down on tables. He became protective of his passwords, jumping whenever I came near while he was texting. The intimacy between us dwindled until it felt like we were roommates rather than lovers. "It's just stress from the new promotion," he'd say whenever I tried to discuss the distance between us. "Once this project is over, things will go back to normal." But they never did. Instead, the gap widened. I found myself checking his phone bill, noting frequent calls to a number I didn't recognize. I smelled unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, not mine, not anything I owned. Once, I found a long blonde hair on his jacket. Jessica had long blonde hair. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my childhood insecurities were clouding my judgment. After all, Jessica lived in the same city, but we rarely saw her except at family gatherings. Why would Kyle be involved with her? As my 30th birthday approached, I hoped it might be a turning point. Kyle had been especially distant, but he promised to make my birthday special. My parents decided to organize a family dinner at Merlot, my favorite restaurant. I spent extra time getting ready that night, wearing the blue dress Kyle had once said brought out my eyes, styling my hair the way he liked it. I was determined to reconnect with my husband, to find our way back to each other. Looking in the mirror before we left, I whispered to myself, "Tonight will be different. Tonight will be a new beginning." I had no idea how prophetic those words would be, though not in the way I'd hoped. Merlot was the perfect setting for what I hoped would be a healing evening. The restaurant's warm amber lighting and exposed brick walls had always made me feel at home. The scent of fresh bread and rosemary filled the air as the hostess led me to our reserved table. Kyle had texted that he'd meet me there, claiming a last-minute work call he couldn't avoid. "Mrs. Parker," the hostess smiled. "Your family has already arrived." My parents stood us. I approached the table, my mother's face lighting up in that contained way that meant she was happy to see me, but trying not to show too much emotion. My father gave me a brief hug, patting my back awkwardly. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he said, handing me a small gift bag. "Nothing fancy, just something your mother picked out." My mother touched my hair. "You look nice, Samantha, though you might want to touch up your lipstick before the photos." Typical. I hadn't even sat down, and she was already finding something to improve about me. I tucked the critique away with all the others and smiled. "Thanks for organizing this, Mom. It means a lot." Jessica wasn't there yet, which was no surprise. She had elevated tardiness to an art form, ensuring all eyes would be on her when she made her entrance. I checked my phone for messages from Kyle, but found none. "Kyle's running late," I explained as I took my seat. "Work thing." My father nodded sympathetically. "That's how it goes when you're climbing the ladder. Your Kyle's a hard worker." The waiter came by to take our drink orders. I asked for water, still hoping to share the first toast with Kyle. My parents exchanged glances. "Go ahead and have some wine, dear," my mother encouraged. "It's your birthday." Before I could respond, there was a commotion at the entrance. Jessica had arrived, and as always, she'd made sure everyone noticed. Her laugh rang through the restaurant as she tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder. She wore a tight red dress that left little to the imagination, drawing appreciative glances from nearby diners. What made my heart stop was who accompanied her, Kyle. My Kyle, holding the door for her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back as they navigated between tables. They were walking too close, smiling too intimately to be just in-laws who happened to arrive at the same time. "Sorry we're late," Jessica announced, leaning down to kiss my cheek with practiced precision that left no lipstick mark. "I ran into Kyle in the parking lot. Lucky coincidence, right?" Kyle avoided my eyes as he took the seat beside me, squeezing my shoulder in what felt like an apologetic gesture. "Happy birthday, Sam. Sorry about the delay." I noticed he smelled freshly showered, his usual cologne stronger than normal. The work call excuse suddenly seemed flimsy. "No problem," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm just glad everyone's here now." The waiter returned, and we ordered our meals. My parents dominated the conversation, talking about their recent cruise and the neighbors' landscaping drama. Jessica interjected frequently with stories about her latest sales triumph or the celebrities she'd allegedly met at a recent conference. Kyle remained unusually quiet, contributing only when directly addressed. Under the table, I placed my hand on Kyle's knee, seeking connection. He flinched slightly before covering my hand with his own. His palm felt clammy. "Everything okay?" I whispered while my father was deep in a story about golf. "Fine," Kyle replied too quickly. "Just tired." The gifts came next. My parents gave me an impersonal gift card to a department store. Kyle handed me a small box containing diamond earrings that looked expensive but generic, like something chosen in haste. Jessica's gift was a designer scarf that I strongly suspected she had bought for herself and decided to give to me at the last minute. "It's exactly your color," she insisted, though the muddy orange had never been a shade I'd wear. The waiter brought out the chocolate lava cake I'd requested instead of a traditional birthday cake. As he placed it before me, my father raised his glass. "Before we sing, I'd like to make a toast to my oldest daughter on her birthday. Samantha, you've always been so responsible. Your mother and I are proud of the stable life you've built." Stable. Not exciting, not impressive, just stable. Like I was a reliable horse rather than a daughter celebrating another year of life. As the waiter lit the single candle on my cake, I noticed Jessica shifting excitedly in her seat, exchanging meaningful glances with Kyle. My stomach tightened with foreboding. Actually, Jessica interrupted before we could sing. "I have an announcement to make. I think it would be the perfect addition to Sam's birthday celebration." All eyes turned to her. She stood, smoothing her dress over her stomach with deliberate emphasis. "I wasn't planning to share this just yet, but since we're all together." She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes gleaming with triumph as they locked with mine. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt eternal. My mother gasped in delight. My father's face split into a grin broader than any I'd seen directed at my accomplishments. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother exclaimed. "When are you due? How far along are you?" "About 10 weeks, Jessica replied, her hand still on her stomach. "But there's more." And that's when she dropped the bomb that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. "Kyle's the father," Jessica announced, her voice ringing with a twisted pride that made my blood run cold. "We've been seeing each other for months. We're going to be a family now." The restaurant continued to buzz with ambient noise around us, but at our table, time seemed to stop. My father's glass froze halfway to his lips. My mother's smile collapsed into confusion, her eyes darting between Jessica, Kyle, and me as she tried to process the unthinkable. Kyle stared at the tablecloth, his face drained of color. "This wasn't how we were going to tell you," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "We," I repeated, the single syllable somehow making it out through my constricted throat. Jessica reached across the table and placed her hand over Kyle's. "We wanted to wait until after the first trimester, but I couldn't hold it in anymore." Her eyes found mine, gleaming with malicious triumph. "We're a family now, Sam. Kyle and I are going to raise this baby together." The calculated cruelty of her timing on my birthday, in my favorite restaurant, in front of our parents, was breathtaking. This wasn't a slip of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a performance designed for maximum damage. My mother found her voice first. "I don't understand. Kyle is Samantha's husband." She stated this simple fact as though reminding everyone of an overlooked detail. "Not for much longer," Jessica replied with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "They've been having problems for ages. Kyle and I didn't plan this, but when real love happens, you can't fight it. Real love." As if what Kyle and I had built over 7 years was somehow counterfeit. "Sam," Kyle finally looked at me, his expression a nauseating mix of guilt and relief. "I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this. Jessica and I, it just happened. Just happened." Like a rainstorm or a flat tire, not a months-long betrayal requiring thousands of conscious decisions to lie, deceive, and destroy. "When?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "When did it just happen?" Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "Does it matter?" "It started at your Christmas party," Jessica interjected, clearly enjoying her role as narrator of my humiliation. "Remember when Kyle and I both disappeared for a while?" You thought he was helping me find my earring. She laughed, a tinkling sound that scraped against my nerves like broken glass. He found something, all right. 6 months. 6 months. While I was planning romantic anniversary surprises and scheduling date nights to reconnect, my husband and sister had been carrying on behind my back. Every late night at work, every mysterious text message, every excuse suddenly crystallized into a pattern of betrayal so obvious I couldn't believe I'd missed it. I think, my father said slowly, setting down his wine glass with exaggerated care, that this is a conversation best continued in private. But Jessica wasn't finished with her performance. There's no need for privacy, Dad. We're all family here. She smiled, rubbing her still flat stomach. And soon there'll be one more Henderson joining us. Isn't that exciting? Your first grandchild. My mother, predictably, latched onto this detail like a lifeline. A grandchild, she breathed, her eyes softening as they always did for Jessica. Well, the circumstances are unusual, but a baby is always a blessing. I watched in disbelief as my mother began to mentally reframe this catastrophe as a joyous family development. Of course she would. Jessica had always been forgiven anything. Her transgressions transformed into triumphs through the alchemy of my parents' favoritism. Sam, Kyle touched my arm tentatively. Can we talk about this privately? I looked at his hand on my arm as though it were a foreign object. This hand that had held mine through my grandmother's funeral, that had slid a wedding ring onto my finger with promises of forever, that had apparently been touching my sister with equal intimacy. I need to use the restroom, I announced, standing so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. No one tried to stop me as I walked away, my legs somehow carrying me despite feeling disconnected from my body. The restaurant bathroom was mercifully empty. I locked myself in a stall, pressed my forehead against the cool metal door, and waited for the breakdown that surely would come. But the tears didn't arrive. Instead, a strange calm descended, a clarity I hadn't expected. This betrayal, while devastating, wasn't actually surprising. Jessica had been taking what was mine our entire lives. Kyle had shown signs of his weakness for months. This was merely the culmination of patterns long established. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow, harder perhaps, but also more focused. I reapplied my lipstick with steady hands. You will not break, I told my reflection. Not here, not for them. When I returned to the table, they were discussing names. Actually discussing baby names as though this announcement had been met with universal joy rather than shattering my world. Kyle looked miserable but resigned, nodding as Jessica rattled off options. If it's a boy, I'm thinking Kyle Jr., she was saying. Though, we could use Henderson as a first name. Henderson Parker has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Parker, my married name. She was already claiming it for her child. Or for a girl, maybe Kylie. 2 on the nose. She laughed, touching Kyle's arm possessively. I slid back into my seat, all eyes turning to me with varying degrees of concern, guilt, and in Jessica's case, barely concealed anticipation. She was waiting for my breakdown. For the scene that would cement her narrative of being the stable, sensible one stepping in to care for poor Kyle after his emotional wreck of a wife fell apart. Instead, I smiled. You've certainly given me a birthday to remember, I replied calmly. But, if you don't mind, I'd like to enjoy my cake before it melts completely. Jessica's smile faltered, confusion clouding her features. This wasn't the reaction she had scripted. Kyle looked equally bewildered by my composure. Sam, he began. We should talk about arrangements. I held up my hand. Not now, Kyle. Right now, I'm going to have my birthday cake. I picked up my fork and took a deliberate bite of the chocolate lava cake, closing my eyes briefly to savor the flavor. When I opened them, I noticed all 4 of them staring at me as though I'd grown a second head. What? I asked innocently. Did you think I'd collapse, make a scene, run out crying? Sorry to disappoint you. Jessica recovered first. We just thought you'd be more upset. Oh, I am, I assured her, taking another bite of cake. But unlike some people at this table, I don't feel the need to make a spectacle of every emotion. Besides, I added, setting down my fork, there's something you should know before we continue this discussion. The slight tremor in my hand was the only outward sign of the emotional earthquake happening inside me. I took a slow sip of water, gathering my thoughts. For months, I'd been collecting pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to complete. Now, faced with Jessica's smug announcement, those pieces snapped into place with devastating clarity. I've known about the affair for 3 months, I replied quietly. Kyle's head jerked up, his eyes wide with shock. Jessica's triumphant smile faltered. What? Kyle managed to stammer. You really should change your email password more often, Kyle. Using our anniversary date wasn't exactly secure, especially when you started acting so suspicious. My mother gasped. Samantha, this is hardly appropriate dinner conversation. I turned to her with steel in my voice. Neither is announcing an affair with your sister's husband at her birthday dinner, Mom. But here we are. Back in March, I'd borrowed Kyle's laptop when mine crashed before an important work presentation. A notification had popped up, an email from Jessica with the subject line last night. My finger had hovered over the mouse. Principles of privacy warring with growing suspicion. In the end, suspicion won. The email had been explicit, detailing their encounter in Kyle's office after hours and referencing several previous meetings. My world had collapsed that day, but I'd kept the knowledge to myself, needing time to process, to plan, to protect myself. After I found those emails, I continued, I hired a private investigator, Davis and Associates. They're very thorough, Kyle. They have photos of you entering Jessica's apartment building 27 different evenings. They have recordings of your phone conversations. They even have the receipt from that jewelry store where you bought her that bracelet she's wearing right now, the one she claimed was from her grateful client. Jessica instinctively covered the gold bracelet on her wrist, her confidence visibly cracking. You've been investigating me? Kyle's voice rose with indignation. That's an invasion of privacy. I laughed, a genuine laugh despite everything. That's rich coming from the man who invaded my marriage. But don't worry. The investigation was completely legal, unlike adultery, which is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Samantha, perhaps we should. I'm not finished. I cut him off. 2 months ago, I contacted Patricia Donovan. She's one of the best divorce attorneys in Chicago. The paperwork is already prepared, Kyle. I've documented everything, secured copies of all our financial records, and taken measures to protect my assets. Patricia advised me to wait until I had all my evidence in order before confronting you. Kyle's face had gone from shocked to pale to slightly green. Jessica looked between us, her triumph fading. As she realized she wasn't delivering news, she was walking into a trap. You've been planning to divorce me? Kyle asked hoarsely. All this time? Yes, I replied simply. I was going to serve you the papers next week. Actually, Jessica's announcement just accelerated my timeline. My mother had tears in her eyes. But Samantha, a divorce is so final. Surely with counseling, Mom, I interrupted gently but firmly. There's no coming back from this. And there is one more thing you should all know. I turned my gaze directly to Jessica, something that makes your announcement particularly interesting. I reached for my purse and pulled out a folded document I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I'd never imagined that moment would come at my own birthday dinner. Kyle had a vasectomy 2 years ago, I replied, sliding the medical report across the table. We decided children weren't in our future. He didn't want the responsibility. Jessica stared at me, then at Kyle, comprehension slowly dawning on her face. That's not possible, she whispered. You're lying. Check the document, I replied. Sacred Heart Medical Center, Dr. Reynolds. The procedure was done 26 months ago. Kyle recovered on our couch watching March Madness. I remember, because I had to keep bringing him frozen peas for the swelling. Kyle looked like he might vomit. Sam, I can explain. Explain what? Jessica cut in, her voice rising. That you had a vasectomy and didn't tell me? That you let me believe. She stopped abruptly, realizing what she was revealing. My mother was examining the medical document with shaking hands. Is this true, Kyle? Kyle's silence was confirmation enough. I turned to Jessica, whose face had drained of all color. So, sister dear, if you're truly pregnant, congratulations are in order, just not to Kyle. He's shooting blanks, as they say. So, who's the real father? Do you even know? The restaurant had grown quieter. Nearby diners were obviously aware that serious drama was unfolding at our table. Jessica's eyes darted around, noting the attention, her carefully constructed moment of triumph crumbling around her. This is a mistake, she insisted weakly. Those medical records must be wrong. They're not wrong, Kyle finally admitted, staring at his hands. I should have informed you, Jess. I didn't think it would matter. We were using protection anyway, or supposed to be. You never thought she'd try to trap you with a pregnancy that couldn't possibly be yours. I finished for him. Rookie mistake, Kyle. You should have realized Jessica always has an angle. Jessica suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need some air, she muttered, grabbing her purse and practically running toward the exit. Kyle looked torn, glancing between me and Jessica's retreating form. Go ahead, I replied coldly. Follow her. You two deserve each other. After a moment's hesitation, Kyle rose and hurried after Jessica, leaving me alone with my shell-shocked parents. My father cleared his throat. Samantha, I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say, Dad. I picked up my fork again and took another bite of my cake. It tasted like ash now, but I was determined to finish it. This was my birthday dinner, after all. Except perhaps that Jessica might need a different kind of doctor now. One who can help her figure out who actually fathered her baby. My mother was silently crying, mascara trailing down her cheeks. How can you be so calm? This is a disaster. I set down my fork and looked her directly in the eyes. No, Mom. A disaster is something unexpected and unavoidable. This was predictable and entirely preventable. Jessica has been taking what's mine since we were children, and you and Dad have been enabling her. The only difference is that this time, I was prepared. I signaled the waiter for the check. I think our celebration is over for tonight. The restaurant had grown uncomfortably quiet, the nearby tables no longer pretending not to listen to our family drama. I signed the check with steady hands, adding a generous tip for the waiter who'd had to witness this disaster of a birthday dinner. As I finished my signature, I saw Kyle returning alone, his face ashen. He slid back into his seat, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture I once found endearing. Where's Jessica? My mother asked, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. She's in her car, Kyle replied. She's upset. I imagine finding out you're not the father of her convenient pregnancy would be upsetting, I replied, my voice deliberately neutral. Kyle looked at me with pleading eyes. Sam, please, can we talk privately? There's so much I need to explain. Is it true? My father's gruff voice cut through the tension. About the vasectomy? Kyle nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. 2 years ago. Sam and I discussed it and decided. You decided, I corrected. You were the one who didn't want children. I was willing to wait. The point is, Kyle continued, it was a mutual decision in our marriage. I should have informed Jessica, but things between us were complicated and complicated. I laughed without humor. That's certainly one word for sleeping with your wife's sister. My mother clutched her pearls, literally clutched the strand of pearls at her neck, as though they might provide some stability in this chaos. I just don't understand how this happened. How could you both do this to Samantha? Before Kyle could answer, Jessica reappeared, her face blotchy from crying, but her composure somewhat restored. She slid into her chair without looking at anyone, her arms wrapped protectively around her midsection. I'm sorry for running out, she replied, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I needed a moment. The waiter approached cautiously. Is everything all right with your meal? Would anyone like coffee or dessert? Just the check, please, I replied. I've already signed it. Wait, Jessica replied suddenly. I want to explain. She looked around the table, her gaze landing on me. Sam, what happened between Kyle and me? It wasn't planned. We never meant to hurt you. And yet you chose to announce it at my birthday dinner, I pointed out. With such impeccable timing. Jessica had the grace to look ashamed. That was wrong. I thought it would be easier with family around. I didn't think about how it would feel for you. You never do, I replied quietly. That's the problem, Jess. You've never once considered my feelings when taking something that belongs to me. Kyle doesn't belong to you, she shot back, a flash of her usual defiance returning. He's a person, not a possession. He was my husband, I replied. The man who promised to love and honor me. And you were my sister who should have respected that commitment, even if he didn't. My father cleared his throat. About the baby, Jessica. If Kyle isn't the father, Jessica's eyes filled with fresh tears. I don't know what to say. The dates matched up. I really thought, who else could it be? My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jessica stared at her lap. There was someone else before Kyle. He's married too. My father groaned, burying his face in his hands. Jessica, for God's sake. I ended it when things got serious with Kyle, she insisted. But the timing. I guess I miscalculated. I couldn't help myself. I laughed. The absurdity of the situation finale. Why breaking through my carefully maintained composure? So, let me get this straight. You were having an affair with a married man, then started sleeping with your sister's husband, got pregnant by the first married man, and tried to pass the baby off as my husband's. Put that way, even Jessica seemed to recognize the horrifying symmetry of her actions. It wasn't like that. I really thought Kyle was the father. Well, he's not, I replied definitively. And now you have a decision to make about who to tell. Kyle, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I think I have some decisions to make, too. He turned to Jessica. You told me I was the only one. That it had been months since you'd been with anyone else. Jessica reached for his hand. Kyle, please. I made a mistake. But what we have is real. He pulled his hand away. Is it? Or am I just another thing you took from your sister? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jessica recoiled as if she'd been slapped. My mother, ever the peacemaker, attempted to salvage the unsalvageable. Perhaps we should all take some time to process this. It's been a shock for everyone. That's an understatement, my father muttered. I stood up, smoothing down my dress. I think that's wise. Kyle, I'll have my attorney contact you next week. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you'd stay somewhere else. Kyle looked up at me, desperation in his eyes. Sam, please, can't we at least talk about this? We're way past talking, I replied, surprising myself with the finality in my voice. You made your choice months ago. You just didn't have the courage to tell me to my face. I turned to my parents. Thank you for the birthday dinner. It was certainly memorable. Samantha, wait. Jessica called as I gathered my purse. You can't just leave like this. I paused, looking at my sister. Really looking at her, and behind the perfect makeup and designer clothes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Insecurity. A deep, gnawing insecurity that had driven her to compete with me our entire lives. I'm not leaving anything, Jess, I replied softly. I'm walking away. There's a difference. I hope you figure out what you're going to do about your baby and its actual father. That's not my problem anymore. As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt strangely light. The betrayal still hurt, a wound that would take time to heal. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of Jessica's shadow. I had finally stepped into the light on my own terms. In the parking lot, I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. Please come home. We need to talk. I deleted it without responding and drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been my life, heading towards something entirely new. The morning after my catastrophic birthday dinner, I woke up in a hotel room I'd checked into rather than returning to the house I shared with Kyle. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, but it was a sanctuary from the storm. My phone showed 27 missed calls and dozens of text messages from Kyle, from Jessica, from my parents. I ignored them all and called Patricia Donovan instead. It's time, I told her when she answered. I want to file the papers today. Patricia's voice was calm and professional. I'll prepare everything. Can you come to my office at 11 o'clock? That meeting set the tone for the days that followed. While my personal life had imploded in spectacular fashion, I focused on the practical steps of dismantling my marriage with surgical precision. Patricia was worth every penny of her exorbitant fee, handling the legal complexities while I concentrated on rebuilding the foundations of my life. Kyle's attempts to contact me grew increasingly desperate. I made a terrible mistake, read one text. Jessica meant nothing to me, claimed another. The transparent falsity of that statement only strengthened my resolve. If she had meant nothing, he wouldn't have risked everything. 3 days after my birthday, I returned to our house while Kyle was at work, accompanied by 2 friends and a moving company. I took only what was indisputably mine, my clothes, personal items, family heirlooms, and the furniture I'd owned before our marriage. I left his wedding ring on the nightstand with a note. Patricia will contact you regarding the rest. My friend Megan had offered her guest room until I found a new place. Stay as long as you need, she insisted, helping me unpack the fragments of my former life. I still can't believe Jessica would do this, Megan said as we arranged my clothes in her spare closet. I mean, I know siblings can be competitive, but this is another level. Jessica's been trying to win a game only she was playing our entire lives, I replied. The sad part is, even when she wins, she loses. She's now pregnant with another married man's baby, and Kyle's already showing his true colors. Those colors became even more evident when Kyle discovered I'd moved out. He showed up at Megan's apartment, pounding on the door until her neighbors threatened to call the police. Sam, please, he begged through the door. Just talk to me. We can work this out. Megan stood beside me, ready to dial 911 if necessary. Should I call the cops? I shook my head. He'll leave eventually. And he did, but not before shouting, "This isn't fair. You didn't even give me a chance to explain." Later that night, my phone rang with Jessica's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sam? Her voice was small, almost childlike. Can we talk? I think we've said everything that needs saying, I replied. Please, she whispered. I need my sister. The audacity was breathtaking. You needed your sister when you decided to sleep with her husband. It's a little late now. I know what I did was unforgivable, she replied, her voice breaking. But I'm scared, Sam. I'm pregnant with a married man's baby, and now Kyle won't return my calls either. Despite everything, a tiny part of me ached for her. The little girl who had always needed more attention, more validation, more everything. But that empathy couldn't override the damage she'd done. What did you expect, Jess? That he'd leave me for you? That you'd ride off into the sunset together? I don't know, she admitted. I guess I didn't think that far ahead. I just wanted what you had. And now neither of us has it, I replied. I hope it was worth it. After hanging up, I sat on Megan's guest bed, allowing myself a moment to feel the full weight of my grief. Not just for my failed marriage, but for the sister relationship that had never been what it should have been. The next day, my parents called. My mother was still in denial, suggesting family counseling as though this were a simple misunderstanding rather than a fundamental betrayal. Your sister made a mistake, Samantha, she insisted. But she's family, and she's going to need support with this baby. Then you support her, I replied. I'm done being Jessica's safety net. My father, surprisingly, seemed to understand better. You're right to be angry, Sam. What they did was wrong, but don't let this poison your whole life. I'm not planning to, Dad. That's why I'm moving on. A week after my birthday, Kyle's tone changed from pleading to bitter. You won't even talk to me, but you had time to freeze our joint accounts, he texted. Real mature, Sam. I forwarded the message to Patricia without responding to him. Jessica, meanwhile, had apparently informed the other married man about her pregnancy. According to my mother, he denied responsibility and threatened to tell his wife Jessica was lying if she pursued it. She's all alone in this, my mother lamented during another unwelcome call. Surely you can find some compassion. My compassion is currently occupied with healing myself, I replied. 2 weeks after my birthday, I signed a lease on a new apartment, a modern one-bedroom in a part of the city I'd always loved, but Kyle had deemed too trendy. I bought new furniture, painted the walls a color he would have hated, and began creating a space that was entirely mine. Patricia called with updates on the divorce proceedings. Kyle was contesting the division of assets despite the prenuptial agreement he'd signed. It's a delay tactic, she assured me. The prenup is solid. He's just hoping you'll get frustrated and agree to mediation where he can appeal to your emotions. My emotions toward Kyle have become remarkably uncomplicated, I informed her. Proceed as planned. At work, I threw myself into projects, staying late and volunteering for assignments that required my complete focus. My colleagues noticed the change but respected my privacy, except for David from the creative department, who left coffee on my desk some mornings with simple notes, hang in there, or their loss. 3 weeks after my birthday, Jessica showed up at my new apartment. I had no idea how she'd found my address. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. Kyle's been sleeping with someone else, she announced when I opened the door. Some woman from his office. Can you believe it? The irony was so thick I could almost touch it. Yes, Jessica. I can believe that the man who cheated with you would cheat on you. That's generally how it works. I thought we were different, she replied, folding her arms protectively over her still flat stomach. I thought he really loved me. I leaned against the doorframe, Suddenly exhausted by the familiar pattern, Jessica makes poor choices, suffers the consequences, then expects everyone to rally around her with sympathy and solutions. What do you want from me, Jess? Comfort? Advice? A place to stay until the next disaster? Her face crumpled. I just want my sister back. I know I don't deserve it, but I miss you, Sam, and I'm really sorry. For a moment, I wavered. Despite everything, this was my sister, my only sibling, my childhood companion, however flawed our relationship had been. I'm not ready to forgive you, I replied finally. Maybe someday, but not now. Right now, I need space to heal. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I understand, but when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. As I watched her walk away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger still, yes, but also a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in our relationship, I was setting the terms, establishing boundaries that protected me rather than accommodating her. Weeks after my birthday, I received divorce papers countersigned by Kyle. Patricia called to confirm he had finally accepted the inevitable and agreed to my terms. It's almost never this clean, she remarked. Usually, there's more fighting, more drama. There's been plenty of drama, I assured her. Just not the legal kind. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights. My phone pinged with a text from David. Some of us are going for drinks tomorrow after work. No pressure, but you're welcome to join. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, thanks. I might do that. It wasn't a commitment to anything, not to David, not to socializing, not to moving on, just a small acknowledgement that life continues, that there might be good things ahead I couldn't yet imagine. As I sipped my wine, I realized that while Kyle and Jessica had taken much from me, they hadn't taken everything. I still had my dignity, my strength, my capacity to rebuild. And perhaps most importantly, I had finally broken free from the patterns that had defined my life for too long. The betrayal still hurt. The loss still ached, but beneath that pain, like green shoots after a forest fire, I could feel something new beginning to grow. 1 year after that birthday dinner that changed everything, I stood in my apartment, no longer new, now comfortably mine, and surveyed my reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was both familiar and strange, like meeting an old friend who has traveled far and returned transformed. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier, remarkably smooth in the end. Kyle, perhaps recognizing the futility of fighting the evidence Patricia had compiled, accepted the division of assets outlined in our prenuptial agreement. I kept the investment portfolio I built before our marriage, half the value of our house when it sold, and my retirement accounts intact. He kept his business shares and his guilt. Jessica's baby, a boy she named Leo, was born 3 months ago. DNA testing confirmed what we already knew. Kyle was not the father. The actual father, a pharmaceutical executive named Richard whom Jessica had met through work, eventually left his wife and moved in with my sister after Leo's birth. Whether their relationship would last remained to be seen, but Jessica seemed genuinely committed to motherhood in a way I hadn't expected. My relationship with my sister remained complicated. After months of respecting my request for space, she had sent a handwritten letter that surprised me with its self-awareness. I've been in therapy, she wrote, trying to understand why I've spent my life competing with you and taking what's yours. Our parents always made me feel I had to be exceptional to be noticed. While you were loved for simply being steady and reliable, I was jealous of that unconditional acceptance I thought you had. Now I realize neither of us got what we needed from them. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just understanding that I'm trying to break this pattern for Leo's sake. The letter had touched me in unexpected ways. 2 weeks later, I had visited her and the baby, a cautious first step toward whatever our relationship might become. Leo had my father's eyes and Jessica's chin, but thankfully none of Kyle's features. Holding him, I felt a complex surge of emotions, sadness for what might have been, hope for this innocent new life, and a tentative connection to my sister I hadn't felt in years. He's beautiful, Jess, I had said sincerely. Would you consider being his godmother? She had asked hesitantly. I want him to have strong, independent women in his life, someone like you. I had agreed, surprising myself. Some wounds heal in unexpected ways. My parents had struggled to navigate the aftermath of the betrayal, initially attempting to maintain relationships with both Kyle and me as though we were divorcing due to ordinary incompatibility rather than extraordinary betrayal. After several tense conversations, my father had finally acknowledged the role their favoritism had played in shaping the dynamic between Jessica and me. We thought Jessica needed more attention because she was more volatile, he admitted during a difficult dinner. You always seemed so self-sufficient, Sam. We didn't realize we were hurting you by treating you differently. It wasn't a complete reckoning, but it was a start. We were learning, all of us, how to build healthier relationships from the ashes of the old ones. Professionally, I had thrived in the past year, channeling my energy into work and earning a significant promotion. The team I now managed included David, whose friendship had gradually evolved into something more. We were taking things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from previous relationships, but his steadiness and genuine kindness had become a cherished part of my life. Kyle had moved to Denver shortly after our divorce, taking a position with a new company and, according to mutual friends, dating someone new. His departure had been a relief, removing the possibility of awkward encounters around the city. Jessica reported that he rarely asked about Leo, seeming relieved to have no biological connection to the child. As for me, I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. The woman who had sat calmly eating birthday cake while her world collapsed had become someone who faced challenges head-on, who valued herself enough to demand honesty and respect, who recognized that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but essential. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reflections. David had arrived to accompany me to dinner. A small gathering of friends celebrating my 30th birthday, a deliberate reclaiming of a date that had been tainted by betrayal. You look beautiful, he said when I opened the door, his sincerity evident in his warm smile. Thank you, I replied, accepting both the compliment and the small wrapped package he offered. You didn't have to bring a gift. It's nothing extravagant, he assured me. Just something I thought you'd appreciate. Inside the package was a journal bound in soft leather. The first page inscribed with a quote, "The most beautiful people are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths." Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. My eyes misted as I ran my fingers over the words. It's perfect, I told him, and I meant it. As we headed to the restaurant where friends waited to celebrate another year of my life, I reflected on the lessons of the past year, lessons hard-won through pain and betrayal, but valuable nonetheless. I had learned that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted creates space for what you truly need. That forgiveness isn't an obligation, but a choice undertaken when and if you're ready. That family ties don't excuse toxic behavior, and blood relationships don't automatically deserve blind loyalty. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me, but by how I treated myself. The woman who had once measured her value through others' eyes now recognized her inherent worthiness independent of external validation. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had in fact been a beginning, painful but necessary, like a bone that must be broken to heal properly. Kyle and Jessica's actions had shattered the comfortable illusions I'd maintained about my marriage, my family, and myself. From those fragments, I'd built something stronger, more authentic, and entirely mine. As David and I entered the restaurant, my friends rose to greet me with genuine warmth, their faces lighting up with affection that asked nothing in return. This, I realized, was what family could be, chosen connections based on mutual respect and care rather than obligation or habit. Happy birthday, Sam, they called, raising their glasses in a toast that held no hidden agendas, no cruel surprises, just simple celebration of another year lived and lessons learned. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lifting just a little more. Thank you all for being here, I replied, taking my seat at the center of the table, a place I now occupied without apology or doubt.